Hello there, folks, and welcome to a brand new episode of Not Another Whisky Podcast. I am one part of your guide for this evening's whisky journey, Nicholas Polacki, joined as always by the Lewis to my Clark, Mr. Mitch Bouchard. Mitch, how's things, man? I saw that you were at the beach this week.
Wait. Rewind a little bit. How come I'm the Lewis?
What do you mean?
You're
do you know who Lewis and Clark are?
Are you talking Superman?
Oh, for fuck's sake. I knew you were going to do that. No, Lewis and Clark, the explorers that kind of discovered California and mapped out all of America. Jeez.
Mate, I'm Scottish, not American. What's wrong with you?
Read a book.
Has it got pictures? Has it got pictures? Because if it hasn't got pictures, I'm out.
Aye, with superheroes apparently. Why were you at the beach, by the way?
What do you mean? Because it's roasting here in Scotland. Summer's actually arrived. So yeah, it was good,
3
man.
days of it?
I was down the beach on Wednesday, took the paddleboards down. I actually cycled from my house down about 30 odd miles. And then Joe picked me up in the van. We chucked the bike in the van, and then paddleboarding, beach action. It was brutal. It's this time in Scotland when people take their tops off when it's hot, and you're just dazzled with the brightness of the blue in their skin color right now. It's horrendous. So everyone's just turning like blue to white, slowly but surely.
Well, it's been a busy week for me. Mitch, I did my first whiskey dinner. I just realised, I had to dust off the old dad jokes. I've not done a whiskey event in almost over a year, believe it or not.
Was that in Vegas by any chance?
It wasn't in Vegas. I was back in New Jersey. So I did a dinner actually in Morristown, New Jersey with the folks at Famish Frog. And it was a blast. We had like 30 folk come out and drink some Shibui and just chat. And they actually were smoking cigars and stuff like that as well. So it was like a cigar whiskey pairing. So real old school. But it was outside. It was nice. So it's been nice, 85, 90 degrees here, which is 27, 28.
Can we tell everyone the quick story about when we did a whiskey dinner in Vegas? Do you remember that? This is hilarious.
Whoa.
So
which one?
We're in, I think it was in the Cosmopolitan. It was one of the restaurants in Vegas. And you'd brought along a Balvenie 40-year-old for the final dish. And each chef was doing a different course. It was all these like superstar chefs that were doing each course.
Yep.
So you brought that 40-year-old. We left it in the private dining room where we're going to do the dinner. Yep. You turned to me and was like, that's going to be all right there, right? That won't be a problem. Yeah, it's fine. We went and had a beer. And then we start the dinner and everything's going really well. And you're bigging up, like, we're going to drink this Balvenie 40-year-old at the end and it's going to be fantastic. And it's still sitting there in the box. So we get to the final course and then you go and pull out the Balvenie. The bottle is sitting in there, but completely rinsed, completely empty. Turns out the first chef used it for his sauce.
Cooked it all out. Cooked down an entire bottle of 40-year-old.
I've never seen you so angry, man. It was hilarious.
Aye. Well, there you go. Anyway, enough about this, Mitch. Because we've got a guest joining us, a rock star guest joining us today. This is a man who's worked with some of the biggest whiskey brands in the world. He looked after Macallan and Highland Park and the rest of Edmonton Group for places like Africa and the Middle East. He created his own independent bottling company where he's got brands like the Whisky Cellar Private Editions, he's got Brig of Perth, he's got Pintail, but more importantly, he's one of the true gentlemen of the Scotch whisky world. Laddies and lassies, please welcome Mr. Keith Bonnington.
Hello.
Keith, how's it going,
talking about me? That's very kind of you, Nicholas. Thank you very much. What an introduction.
No, there you
Hi,
go.
Guys.
How are you doing, Keith? That was a bit of an introduction. Keith, I think Nicholas has got a little bit of a man crush on you based on that introduction. You might have to watch your DMs after this.
Well, we worked together for a few years, Nicholas and I. He knows me well, so I'm surprised he came up with that. But no, it's very, very kind of you. Very, very flattering.
No, great to have you on the show, Keith. We haven't actually met before, so that was a great introduction there. Just a little snippet of kind of what you've done in your career, but I'd love to hear more about that. So, can you tell us how everything kind of began? What led you into going solo with this great company that you have now?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is actually my 21st year in the Scotch whisky industry, believe it or not. I kind of started out, straight from uni into the beer business for a few years, and then I started out at White Mackay, and instantly got the bug for the category, for the product, for the people, for everything around it. The romance of Scotch whisky, and as soon as I was involved, I just thought, I want to spend the rest of my career doing this in some form. Whether it's commercial or kind of marketing, which is more my kind of natural leaning. I kind of progressed, and then I moved to Edrington, eventually, and spent 11 great years there, as Nicholas said, working on brands like Macallan and Highland Park. But there came a point, I was made keeper of the Quake in 2013, which was around the time we got the board backing for the setup in Africa. So I kind of pioneered the office in Johannesburg, and by the time I left, I think there were 8 people reporting into me, but from a travel perspective, it wasn't sustainable. So I had the opportunity to move, or had the opportunity to do something completely different on my own. And I spent a lot of time sitting at airports waiting for flights and considering what I really wanted to do within the industry. And being an independent bottler is really where I wanted to go. And to really take some of those kind of natural, that creative, I suppose, flair that I have into my own brands and brand building. So 2016 really, 2017 got going with the Whisky Cellar. I set it up with a business partner who I quite quickly bought out the business because I kind of wanted to control the kind of direction of the company. And he was sort of passionate about online selling, but I'm very much about whiskey, being a sort of touchy-feely, very tactile product, and really wanted to take it out to the market. So did our first release in 2019 under the Whisky Illuminati brand. And some great casks came our way, so I bottled those out. But really got going with it at the beginning of 2020. I launched the Whisky Cellar Private Cellar Selection, and the big plan behind that was to take it, around the UK to all these events. And February 2020, the world kind of turned upside down for everyone. And
what happened?
Oh God, you don't want to know.
Something happened.
But it kind of forced my hand a little bit into finding other avenues, and ultimately, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. I had a LinkedIn profile, but I never really leveraged it much. But I used it to reconnect with old colleagues and just contacts that I had around the world. And suddenly the focus of the business became very much export, with a couple of online retailers in the UK that sort of kept the lights on as far as the UK business was concerned. So here I am now with a great sort of portfolio that I've developed over time. One of the Edrington mantras was, about setting lots of fires, but fail fast and fail cheap. If something's not working, switch it off. Don't spend a lot of money or focus on it. Move, sort of pivot into something else. I've been doing a lot of that, but 75% of my sales now are abroad, and that's why I was 2 weeks back from Italy. I've been out in Switzerland this year. I was supposed to go out to New Zealand, but that kind of fell through at the last minute. But I will go out there next year. So, Taiwan, Japan, in the last 3 months, so the business is going well. I'm loving it. I'm doing everything, which is, there comes a point where you think, right, well, I need to bring someone in to help in certain areas where I sort of lack expertise, because I get stressed out about things, not about, whiskey and selling whiskey and bringing products to market. I get stressed out about the ink running out in my printer, or the paper supply running out, or
logistics.
My laptop, not for some reason it won't connect with the Wi-Fi one day. That's the kind of stuff that I kind of outsource a lot of the support there. But I'd love to have someone in house just to kind of slap me around the head every once in a while and say, well, stop stressing out about silly things like that and just get out there and sell the stuff.
That's true though, Keith. Like I think like that can become like a thing where when you're doing your own business, the small things that you're not like, when you're part of a bigger company, there's always somebody in the IT department, there's somebody in the legal field, there's somebody in the finance department that looks at stuff for you. So you've got that back of house logistics support. When you then start your own thing, you are all of it. And I mean, it sounds like you wanted to do this to cut back on travel, which seems to have backfired massively.
Yeah, well, I know. I mean, a good thing is you can manage it yourself now. That's the, I work it with, I call them, partners and importers, distributors, but really they're partners, and I try to sort of emphasize that when I go down. I spend time with the sales guys, but, I'm kind of managing that now. And I was out in Italy for a week. We did, the Milan mixology over 3 days, and then we did a tasting in Brescia, stayed in Monza, went down to Rome and did a tasting at the White Rabbit down there. And it's brilliant. The guys kind of, they see me as part of their team, and that's essential in terms of, winning their hearts and minds and developing my brands in these markets.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So you did that really just carving out relationships back on LinkedIn, because Mitch has got a grinder profile that he's been really tapping into over the last 5 years as well. So is that the same thing, Mitch? Is that what you've been hitting up? Yeah.
Keith, I'm interested in this whole travel thing right now. So what are you seeing when you're going around markets? Any trends that you're kind of noticing? Any favorite markets to visit right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two that I mentioned, Switzerland and Italy, are really, I'm focusing on those at the moment because I've got two very, very good importers that are, loving what I'm doing, and they're really committed to the project, and they don't have a lot of other whiskies in their portfolio. So you kind of spend time with the sales guys. I've got WhatsApp groups set up with them, so if they're doing a tasting out in Zurich or out in Rome or in Florence, they'll message me on a Saturday or a Sunday, knowing that I've always got my phone on me. I don't mind when it's my own business, replying if they ask me what kind of cask was this matured in, how long was it finished for. They'll get an immediate response, and that's really important to me. In terms of trends, I mean, what I'm finding is, I'm very focused. I do have a blend in the portfolio that we'll probably talk a little bit about. But single malt Scotch whisky is probably no surprise to you that the demand there is really, really high. I almost get the feeling that when I go to things like Milan Mixology, I was at an event in Zurich, very, very young consumer profile, male and female, coming to taste single malt whiskey, which is so refreshing to see. And interestingly, I mean, we're seeing this in the industry generally a lot, much more sort of, things starting to move towards, females enjoying the product a lot more than I remember, say 20 years ago when I started out in the industry. So, I mean, I think about my own kind of younger brother. I mean, I don't think he's ever touched a blended whiskey in his life. And I keep saying to him, there's some great blends out there. You're missing out. But him and his mates they started going to whiskey festivals, and it was straight from probably gin or rum, maybe that they drank previously, straight into single malts.
So actually, on that note, like, as you're seeing that this shift, I guess, is a kind of a drastic shift in independent bottlings over the last 10 years. Some of the biggest companies out there are actually clawing back some of their own distillates and their aged inventories. Does this affect like what your vision is for your brand and what's in the horizon to kind of combat that? Or have you got relationships and parcels of liquid that you've laid down and like, this is the way that I want to go, and it's slightly different?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And, my assets are, well, I suppose the brands in a way, but I mean, some of them are relatively new. I don't know there'd be a huge amount of value in that, but certainly, my assets are the liquid. I don't have a distillery. I don't own a bonded warehouse. So everything is kind of third party. So, I rely on the industry to support. Yeah. Fortunately, I think, it helps having had having a reputation that's better than not in the industry. Yeah. And knowing, the suppliers knowing that I'm bottling whiskey, I'm not interested in, making quick money. If I make money, it goes straight back into stock. I never sit with a lot of cash in the business. It's all put into whiskey stock for future bottling. So, I've got visibility of what I'm going to be bottling for a little while to come yet. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. One of the challenges that sort of keeps me up at night is keeping that inventory topped up. So if I bottle 10 casks, next month, I want 15 or 20 casks in the warehouse to replace them. That's the only way I can, continue growing this business. Yeah. So, I think that would be for independents one of the challenges. The other challenge is getting access to liquid that is bottle ready. Very often it isn't. So you're then into the realms of kind of reworking it, re-racking it. That's time. It's extra money. And also making sure that you're not just bottling the same as every other independent bottler. So, we're all kind of, I suppose, fishing at the same pond and catching the same kind of fish, really, with the odd exception here and there. So that's where having a point of difference, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about Pinto, for example, with some of these incredible kind of sweet wine finishes, is sort of gives you that point of difference.
Yep. And even your expertise in nosing and tasting, because you and I obviously did get to work together, but the panel of people that you use to kind of nose and taste through some of the liquid, like that to me is a big point of distinction as well. And I think, having expert noses, like not that this is always the case, but there are brands, and I'll rather than talk about Scotland, I will talk about America in this instance. There's a lot of kind of third-party bottlings and brands that kind of pop up, and they're sourcing the liquids from some great places and doing some really interesting stuff. And some of them are really excellent. And then you just get these groups of people who are like, well, I came from the finance industry, and they've just got money. They don't necessarily have the background and the expertise of putting liquid together. And they create a brand and they put it out there, and people buy it because they think it's one thing, and maybe perhaps there's not that kind of clarity of how the liquids are put together. Whereas you're different in that field.
Yeah, I mean, I am, and I mean, I'm not a whiskey maker, but I know what I like, and I've tasted a lot of whiskey over the years. But I tap into a wealth of knowledge. I mean, you and I both know the likes of Max McFarlane, who was a Highland Park whiskey maker for many years. He's retired, but I think he's busier now than ever. Working on projects like Ardgowan. But Max is a good friend. He comes along to these assessments that we do. In fact, I met Max just a couple of weeks ago to let him taste, kind of an impromptu thing, but I wanted them to nose and taste a couple of whiskies that I'd re-racked again into sweet wine casks. And interesting, a couple of them I wasn't quite sure about them, but Max said straight away, he's got a kind of grading system, 1 through to 10, or 0 through to 10. He said, these are 9 out of 10 casks, Keith, get these bottled. So that's then giving me, right, okay, well, that's giving me the kind of comfort that a whiskey maker who knows a lot more about it than me is saying, these are great. In actual fact, there was another ex-Edrington colleague at the same meeting who really enjoyed them. But other guys, Stuart McPherson, Macallan, Master of Woods, again, retired, but working on a number of different projects. My old boss, Stuart McRae, these are guys that come along and they're retired now, but they've got a wealth of knowledge. We can sit in these rooms and you're talking, nearly 200 years worth of experience. If you get sort of 4 or 5 of us together. So, it's backed with that sort of, those credentials. It's not just me picking a cask and saying, right, we'll get that one bottled. We go through a fairly rigorous process of nosing and sampling, and, a lot of re-racking, and sourcing both kind of your sherry casks, or also sherry, PX sherry, some Manzanilla, some Amontillado sherries that I've finished in recently. But I'm really interested in this kind of new, well, very old wines, but stuff that's never been used before in the Scotch whisky industry. For example, doing a Glenlossie Picolet, we're finished in a Picolet wine cask from the northeast of Italy. 300 acres of wine growing land. It's nothing, but it's a similar style of wine to Sauternes, which is much, much bigger, 5,000 acres in France. And, I love doing things like that. I'm never quite sure how it's going to work out, but, I've got the support there of 1 or 2 of them maybe haven't worked, and we'll get those into amazing first fill Oloroso sherry for 6 months, and it tends to sort it out.
So, and on that note, Keith, I was going to ask you what casks you liked working with, but you just answered the question before I asked it. So that was kind of cool. I might as well leave just now, actually. I'll just get my coat. I'll go outside and enjoy the sun. But you said there sometimes it doesn't work. Have you ever had examples of that where you just, go back to it after a couple of months and be like, bollocks, like this has just not worked out for me? And
yeah. I mean, there was one that I bottled. It was a Longmorn that it went into Sauternes wine cask, and I left it about 12 months, and it kind of developed a little bit of acidity. It wasn't unpleasant. I mean, I think a lot of bottlers would have bottled it quite happily, and it would have sold. Longmorn, it's a popular name. It wasn't quite what I was looking for. Yet there was another. I'd filled a Glenelgin, re-racked a Glenelgin into Sauternes, and it worked perfectly. In fact, it's one of my favourite whiskies that I've ever bottled. So it's interesting how 2 different distillates didn't quite work. So the Longmorn, we then filled it into first fill Oloroso sherry for 6 months, and we created what we called a kind of double cask finish, which a lot of people like, and it feels like a really great idea, strategic kind of marketing initiative. It was actually correcting a slight error in inverted commas, because it wasn't, it was by no means a bad whiskey, but it just wasn't quite what we were looking for. And that little bit of acidity just, it kind of lost its character as a distillate. And we're keen to try to make sure that, the whiskey is still the hero. I mean, a lot of the finishes that I do, they're not for particularly long periods of time, 6 months, for example. And it just takes the whiskey on a slightly different direction, rather than completely killing the distillate with dry sherry or, intense kind of sweet fortified wine or whatever, So that would be kind of one example. It doesn't happen very often, that we get it wrong.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I think a lot of people listening, they're obviously into whiskey. They might be thinking like, oh, I'd love to start up my own independent bottling business. Have you got any advice to anyone out there on how you did it and how it all worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the climate now makes it really tough to start out. Unless you've got a sort of, I mean, even if you've got an industry background, I think setting up as an independent, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get access to liquid and good quality liquid. I mean, we didn't take out big bank loans. We didn't saddle ourselves with debt to get going. I say we. I mean, it's now just me, but we didn't. We didn't take on big loans to get started. So if you strike it lucky and you come across, I found the first 4 casks that I got access to, and I purchased, believe it or not, 1997 Klein Leash, 97 Glen Tuckers, 1998 bottle. Like, I'm thinking, my God, this is a piece of cake. If I get stuff like this and I can bottle it and sell it, like that, these are big brands. I was amazed. And then of course you realise that further down the line, demand rises, and everyone's at it, and you're kind of pulling from the same stock, and and you just have to try and find different ways of accessing it. I think be very nice to people. I think it's very much a seller's market still. It feels to me. So you have to, I think you have to know kind of the industry, know people, have a good reputation, be able to get on with people, and not get too tied up in looking for the kind of big names. A lot of the stuff that I bottle was distilleries, whether it be in Speyside or in the Highlands, that produce predominantly for blending. But I love bringing some of these distillates to market as single malts. And
that's really interesting, because we had Billy Walker on the show. And if you look at what Billy Walker did, even buying into distilleries, Billy Walker bought distilleries that were predominantly creating liquid that was being used for blends and the backbones of great quality blend whiskies. And then he would revitalize them and bring them back as single malts in their own right. And clearly with great success right across the board. Even within that, then you start to see like quite a few mergers for some of these kind of the producers themselves merging, acquisitions and mergers kind of happening right across the board in Scotland over the last 50 years. Do you think that you would ever see something like that where there's mergers with independent bottlers the same way? Or do you think IBs are going to continue to expand with things like their own distilleries like Gordon and MacPhail? Or I mean, what do you see the opportunity as, like, or is it kind of whatever people can make it in Scotland to help kind of build the categories?
I think with IBs, I don't see many IB. I mean, you're right. The Gordon MacPhail model has been followed by a couple of other independent bottlers who, kind of more recent, where they're either buying or setting up distilleries, or they're buying distilleries, or creating something completely new. It's easier to do that if you've got a track record and you've been laying down casks for 150 years. To start out now, I think what you'll find is probably, certainly but my wish would be for some of the independent bottlers to get together and almost form like a little collective, which might be kind of sharing things like warehousing, bottling, the kind of stuff, even resource, having a combined kind of sales resource. I mean, I've always viewed the Scotch whisky industry as very much a collective, and there are certain competitive elements to it, of course, a race to be the most valuable single malt whisky in the world, etc. But I think generally speaking, we work quite collectively, and I think with the IBs it should be no different. I've found there's quite stiff competition because I know we all know that we're kind of we're emailing and phoning the same contacts by and large to source liquid, or we're getting lists through from brokers. We're all looking at the same stuff, so there's a race to buy liquid. But I'd be delighted to kind of share a sales resource or a warehouse or some kind of bottling facility with another 2 or 3 independent bottlers. I think that's the way I see it maybe going in the future.
That's cool. I like that idea, actually. I think, and that's how a lot of these companies came to be anyway. A lot of them started out in different, like you said, you talk about pivoting, like what you thought the plan was going to be and then what the plan actually is. And now with the Scotch whisky industry clawing back a lot of its own juice, and independent bottlers having to maybe think about how to work better and more collaboratively together, we might end up getting some better more efficient uses of time and energy and effort, which makes us, means you can spend your resources on maybe putting more money into liquid and taking those barrels, and like you said, like the finishing periods and the upgrades into oak maturation and producing better quality liquids. And I've obviously, your liquid is insanely good already. And it wouldn't. I know you well enough to know that you don't release whiskey if you're not happy with it.
Yeah, if we love it enough, we'll bottle it. But we have to love it. And we're talking a max 8 out of 10 or above. Nothing less.
Yep.
On that point, Keith, this is kind of like a favorite child question here, but are there any that you've released have been your absolute favorite and been like tempted to keep for yourself?
Well, yeah, funnily enough, I mean, I do get that feeling sometimes with casks, when they're bottled and sold. It's almost, particularly if you've nurtured it and you've done something, re-racked it or finished it, or in a certain way, and you're really, really proud of the end product. I actually, it gets to the point, and I should probably have a different mindset, sell it all, get it out the door as quickly as possible. But I mean, I do hold back a little bit from, it's precious liquid. And I mean, a couple of examples. I mean, I wrote down a couple of sort of my favourite whiskies from previous releases. In Series 1, we did a 1995 Glenallachie, and it'd been in a refill hogshead for its whole maturation period, and it was just delicious. I did nothing with it. It's one of the, and again, we're not re-racking everything by any means. I mean, by and large, it's a much easier job if we can just leave it as it is, and we know that it's in great wood and it's just developing really nicely. I mean, that was a cracker. In the same release, there was a 7-year-old Royal Brackla that had been in a 14 months in an Oloroso sherry quarter cask, so a much smaller vessel and a very, very active cask. I mean, the colour was almost like Coca-Cola, and I just thought, we've killed it. But we certainly hadn't. And it's one of those whiskies that, I mean, I could have sold it 10 times over. I mean, it went so quickly because of the colour and the character of the liquid. So those are, I mean, I've kept a couple of bottles back of both. I always do, because I want to keep them as a sort of archive, if you like. I've always got one that might get open one day and one that I'll keep. But yeah, I mean, I think I was talking about Pintail there. I mean, the one that is just bottled that will be launched at the end of, middle of June, when I get back from holiday. Is the Picolet Glenlossie 2009, 14 years old. Spent 5 months in the Picolet wine from the northeast of Italy. It's the one I mentioned slightly earlier in the conversation. It's absolutely incredible, and it's an industry first. No, I cannot find a single producer who's ever used Picolet wine casks, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why, because they're difficult to source. I bought 3 of them, but the Picolet grape is grown, as I mentioned, 300 acres of land in the Friuli region of the northeast. It's dwarfed by Sauterne. So Sauterne wine, you'll find Sauterne finishes across the industry, and it works very well. It's a similar style of wine, and it's delivered the same note. So that'll get bottled. Well, it's been bottled. That'll get sold, and again, I'll probably feel a bit sad when that leaves the warehouse. And I'll keep a few bottles of that back as well.
Nice.
Is it that sense of these are your babies, and now you're sending them off to college, kind of thing?
A bit like that, yeah. I'm going through that. Well, I've gone through that experience. I mean, you remember? I was
going to say
Nicholas. I mean, she was probably she'd been a little toddler when you last saw her, but she went off to uni last summer. So I picked her up yesterday. That's her back for this summer, and it wasn't. Yeah, I'm not saying it's whiskey first in my daughter, but is that it's that kind of sense of releasing something that you've kind of nurtured into the wild, and hoping that you'll one day see it again.
Brilliant.
Wow, okay. That's brilliant.
Listen, it's been great having you on the show, but before you go, we've got some quick fire questions for you. All right, so maybe whiskey related, maybe not. Favorite animal?
A salmon. Well, can I say a fish?
Yeah, I suppose.
Wait, are you eating it?
Yeah. Would you like a pet salmon? Just sit there and stroke it while you're watching a movie?
It would have been better people like dog. Love a dog.
Yeah.
Just like charred grilled.
I was going. I mean, I have a dog and I love my dog, but I thought that was too obvious. So yeah, I'd go. I remember doing one of these things, and I came out with salmon for some reason is a fish that I greatly admire and love to eat.
there a cask that if you could, obviously everybody's going to say, oh, I wish I had a 75-year-old Macallan, but is there a holy grail of something that you'll love to get your hands on just because it's maybe people don't know, or it's almost similar to what you've done with the Piglet cask and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was really keen to get my hands on a Bruichladdich a couple of years back, and I found one that surpassed what I was kind of looking for. It was a private seller who was looking to sell a Bruichladdich, fully 10 years matured in a Jurançon French sweet wine cask, and it was just incredible. And again, it's one of those that I could have sold the thing 10 times over. So that was a box ticked. Any others? I mean, I try not to get myself too bogged down, and I'll assess what comes my way, rather than sort of pitching specifically for casks. And I'm more interested in that. The first thing I do is, particularly when I'm re-racking or finishing, I have a grid system where I'll take the kind of distillate style of, take Speyside for example, kind of light and fruity, delicate, floral, and then I try to kind of match the style of wine that's been in the cask previously. So I mean, I'm kind of looking at the moment for some of the sort of German and Austrian sweet wines. I mean, I did buy an Ardbeg cask quite early on in my journey, and again sold that through 15 years old Ardbeg. Love to get another one of those. That was an incredible whiskey. But yeah, I don't get too stressed out about it or too bogged down and what I really want. It's more, I've got some good inventory now, and it's aging in some really nice active casks, and I'm quite happy kind of motoring along like that.
This was the quick fire round, right? That's not really quick fire.
Sorry, right? Okay, yeah. I need to be a bit punchier, yeah.
If you're a car, what kind of car would you be?
I would be my Mitsubishi that's sitting out the drive. It's been a godsend for me. It's one of the Warrior L200s, and it's a beast of a truck, and it takes about 60 cases of whiskey in the back.
There you go.
Nice.
What's the last album you listened to music wise?
Today I was listening to Simon and Garfunkel in the
Nice.
car, which I listen to a lot. My favorite band by a mile. I regret probably never having the chance again to see them live. But yeah, Simon and Garfunkel, Sounds of Silence.
Oh, awesome album.
Do you normally go for a starter or a dessert?
Always a starter.
Always a starter?
That's the same with me.
I'm not a dessert person at all.
Favorite person within the whiskey industry?
Oh, that's a really tough one.
Shouldn't be that tough, mate. I'm right here.
I mean, I tell you, a guy. I've got a lot of time for you, Nicholas. You know that. But,
small doses, all right.
A guy that I really liked, who I came across in my White Mackay days, was Willie Tate.
Yep.
In Jura. Just a really, I mean, there's so many to mention actually, but one of the things I loved about him, he was just such a gentle guy with the industry at heart. I mean, I just like simplicity in people and honesty in people, and he sort of epitomized that. So I get along with most people in the industry. There are very, very few that I've come across that I haven't gotten on with. It's that kind of industry. I think it attracts good people.
Keith, thanks very much for jumping in the show. Quick plug for yourself. Like, where can people find the brand? Where can people go out and get it? Where can people follow you on social and all the rest of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're fairly active on social. Instagram is the Whisky Cellars, and that's obviously CELL rather than S. So the Whisky Cellars on Instagram. We're quite prolific on that. I'm useless at this stuff. That everything's kind of wrapped up under the Whisky Cellar banner at the moment. We might pull kind of Pintail or Brig of Perth out into, giving its own kind of identity.
Yep.
But in terms of retail, my top customers in the UK would be Aberdeen Whisky Shop. They do a great online service. Tom and Towel, the Whisky Castle, again, online, and probably Master of Malt.
Superb, Keith. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. Again, for everybody listening in, follow us on Instagram, Not Another Whisky Podcast. And thanks very much for tuning in.